Finding a spot where there isn't a glare on this compass is a bit difficult. This is the Brunton compass. Here it is, gimbaled and supported on the tripod. So how does this thing work? This is our sighting line. We'd look through this piece right here. See the little hole in it? And we'd be looking that direction. Since this is a direct read compass, we would read, in this case, almost 49 degrees off of true north. So this is very accurate. What we would do is we would put a survey stake down here and hang a plumb bob off of it, and we would get our bearings from here. We would turn this and we would get our readings. In this case, we're almost 90 degrees, which means that we're almost looking true. There we are, almost 90 degrees, so we're looking almost true east here. And we would get our bearing from here. We would run a tape measure out, say, to that tree right there, this one. We would measure that distance, and then we would come back in and using a plot on a piece of paper, we would then draw 90 degrees, say that's 16 feet, and we would throw an arc out there to 16 feet, and we would know, because this is an exact bearing of 90 degrees at 16 feet, we know that the tree is out there. It's a little different from the next method of drawing maps that I'm going to be showing you, but this does work. It's very accurate, but you need a point that everything's going to be measured from. You should use a survey stake buried into the ground, and every time you come back, set up on the exact same spot when you're surveying. And this will help you to map out very quickly. In this case, we know it's 90 degrees, 16 feet. We turn to the next tree right there, that tree that's standing up, and that one is 60 degrees at 18 feet. What we have here is a vevor transit. It's 24 power according to the deal here. This is a plumb bob, which would be hooked to the bottom of the tripod that it sits on. This knob is for focusing, this knob is for turning the thing, and there is an azimuth ring on the bottom of this. And then this is your focus, and this is what you look through right here. This little bitty housing that you see right here, it's on the side, it's about an inch above this base. That's what you use to center the bubble by looking into this. To hook this on, there is I believe a 3/8 screw in the tripod, and you screw that into the base of this. Now, I did try to look through this thing off camera, and I found that my camera will not allow me to see through this thing. So when you look through this, you would be getting a center line here, and you see the 4s on this. This tells you that you're in the 4-foot area. And then there's your 5, and then you count the, in this case, 1/8 of an inch, which are the markings. And I'll show you the actual rod in just a moment. And then that would give you your elevation. And then you could check other locations, and you could tell whether if the numbers are getting smaller this way, you're going down towards 3 feet, then the land is rising. If the numbers are rising towards 5 feet, then the land is sinking, because you're reading more rod. There are 2 other lines at the top and at the bottom, and for clarity, I didn't draw it on one piece. But these lines will give you an altitude, in this case just above 5, and right here just below 10. You would do some fancy math, and you could get the distance very accurately. But again, I can't show you that on the transit itself. This is the rod. The top right here is where your 2-inch starts. This white is 1/8 of an inch thick, this black is 1/8 of an inch thick, and so forth, and you would count your 1/8 up to get your altitude. And of course, with the focus, you can split this 1/8 out, and you can get it down to a 1/16. It's pretty much readable to that extent. Now let me show you how this thing is set up. With the tripod set up, which I'm not going to do because this is just a demonstration, you would put some information on this survey stake, such as the lot number or some other identifier, and you would make a log of the entry on it. Now these survey stakes are considered temporary. They're also sometimes called monuments and benchmarks, but they are temporary survey stakes. If you're going to be doing a survey over a long distance, you really need to have about 5-foot long survey stakes. That way you can drive them in, you can put colored flag on them, and you can see them. This at 250 feet would be too hard to see. That 5 foot with a ribbon on it, you would be able to see it. At 1,000 feet, you would never see this. So we're going to pretend like this is down underneath the thing. The plumb bob is sitting right on top of it. And now let's look at the setup of how we use the transit itself. There are 3 thumb knobs right here, one in the back, and you use this for centering the bubble. Now you cannot see the bubble on this tripod. We can use this to turn this. With the bubble now in the center, and I had to adjust these 2 thumb screws a little bit to get it to be in the center, I rotate this thing all the way around in a circle just to make sure that the bubble stays right where it's at. Right here is where we read the bearing that we're looking at. If we turn it this way, it starts moving towards 350. And if we turn it the other way, of course, it starts moving clockwise, going around to reach the direction. What you would do, you've got this point down here, this survey stake, and you would line this up, and then you would take a reading on your rod. So let me turn this to a tree so that you can get an idea as to what would be happening here. If we were looking through the transit, we would then zoom in. Now remember the drawing with the line in the center. So you see there's our big numbers. That 3 is a 3 foot, and that 1 is 1 inch. And if that line went over right through the top of the tick mark directly above the 3, then that'd be 3 feet, and then 1 2/8 of an inch. So you'd be reading 3 2/8 for the altitude where that rod is at. Then again, there would be the numbers, the lines at the top and at the bottom. You could read that and then do some math, and that math would be contained inside the pamphlet that comes with it. And then you would know the exact distance from this survey stake over there to where that rod is at. And you could use a protractor on the point. You could draw your arc out there, and you would know that the tree was out there. And on a bearing of 338, use a compass rose, set it down on here, graduated for magnetic north, which is what we've set up. We set this up to be pointing to magnetic north, and then draw our area from 338 for that length, and everything is good. This is a white paper on how I use either the military lensatic compass, the Brunton transit compass, or the vevor transit to find a location. The first thing I do, since everything is going to be based on a magnetic heading, is I put a line which will represent my magnetic bearing. This is magnetic north and south. We don't need to worry about east and west. And this is my point from which all bearings were made. So our first bearing was, say, 27 degrees magnetic. So we center this dot where our stake is, get this all aligned perfectly, and we find 27 degrees. We put a line there, and let's say that our distance was 14 feet. Using the 1/8 inch scale, which is right here, we go 14 feet. So here's 12, 12, 13, 14. So we put 14 right there and line it up with that, and oddly enough, there's our point. Oddly enough, that's our point right there. So then we put a tree on here, and because we measured against the trunk of the tree, we want to put the tree behind it. So there's our tree. Now, let's say that our next bearing was 52 degrees to a fence post. So we come out here, we get everything aligned, we find 52 degrees, we put a tick mark, and then the other bearing for the fence was say 60. So we put this back on here, we find 60 and put a little line, and we can now measure out using our 1/8 inch. Let's say it was 10 feet. So here's 8, here's 10 right here. We can do it this way. Put it here, count 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's our 10 right there. And then this one right here was, say, was 15. We can put this on 16. Get it aligned perfectly here. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So there's our 13. And there's our fence. So here's our fence. And here's our tree. And this is how you map out. This right here is that survey stake. If you come back out and have to survey again, you need to be able to find that stake. So it's very, very important that when you put that stake into the ground, you sink it deep enough that it's not going to get run over by a mower, but at the same time you're able to find it. And what you would do is just chart out all your points on here. You need to tape this piece of paper down, and I can't do that on top of my computer keyboard, which is where I'm filming this, but you can see how it's done. From this point, using a 360 protractor, you just sit here and map out where everything sits, and you will get a very accurate display or a graph of your property where you're trying to do something. Dysfunctional vet out.